a dime. Section 1, half a dime a day. Vox recording. Recordings are in the public domain or to volunteer. LibriVox.org. Sue Anderson on half a dime a day, titled How a Lady Efficient Income from Government-Based Confidence, Homestead, who's in $20 per annum, to hold it and live for 3 years on half a dime, by Sarah Monmouth. Prefatory. Faithful narrative of family, reared in abundance, the competence which she used purposes, but destroyed, and crippled with impending no friends to look to. For it was prepared for a lecture, its delivery impossible at the suggestion of half a dime. You will hardly dissent if I say how to die on 5 and how to live on that. Perhaps I should say exist. It is keeping a small annuity at the outset that to live on a will prove a fat remedy. Bottles advertised to prevent point heads down to Coventry before this bill. But I must admit that only buys the food and other things than victuals and to support life. Live in, certainly, and fire in. I had an old house and I got $20 for pasturing. In apples, there was a crippled arm and blind knitting and making mock flat. Most I could ever earn dollars. Here $50 deducted for taxes. 40 I was not only to, but all twist into a neatly knotted frugal gift to each. 3 years made. I have got $20 through contrivance and arithmetic. And who awoke one morning, I awoke one myself poor, so, or I don't know, as I was like one for months, and in which a frightful incubus my gasping life, with cold, clammy. I was not what to do. Old roof above me, to sell or mourn myself in the eyes of the honoring my ancestors, had not a dollar, and I had no health, no work to which I could turn. You have heard of people live. I was at my live. Why? Years? I had tried that former years. Not take a family into that country place. I couldn't pay for the damages done the bill. Could I have borne the annoyance of a family and nervous debility? There were $40 per count on. At the began to fall into a color. 20 of this 40 on, but before war to the third. It mind, I body, it must weigh. You mustn't starve, and I either. I have the best I must have. Stand once for rule and make your. Thus mine standard displayed to quietly recognize. I would live on and save 3 to the weekly. Christian Union rivaled editorials, and there was still dollars unappropriated. Wanted to take enough from it of the best magazines. Should on but 1 or 3 books in the course of the year. I must have expensive tastes. On their ideas as to what is expensive. To pay mind, I should deem the most wicked extravagance. Cheap newspaper of society and world at your door every week. Far too expensive. I could afford $17 assigned to supply food, eating, leaving 13. I fortunately had a great loss befell. Winter, the net with 1 cord, which saved $1, and I could only with my disabled sticks for my fire each day. Cold spells, I took a warm to bed. And thus to do, I would put mittens on my, and when the rooms cover all over what I had read, degree from enervating my poring over poverty. I had an but my own wardrobe suit was pretty. I never had a pair of shoes for more than it was entire by any article of clothing. I had to tax both in to get together garments in decency. Figured dressing gown, flannel. The outside, while the lining was good, pieces. Washed, got out enough of the bands around the skirt and to hide holes and faded. Then I raveled an undersleeve, the narrow fluted edge. I had a quite dressy green hole, and I took genuine piecing it out day after mittens on my cold hand fire. For owing to shoes were very short, was very decrepit and painful. I recollected that when I had an abundance of nice new, I had been quite impatient for 2 days to finish it off. It was remodeled, said it was new, and a good deal more of it then, and have had occasion to. I was glad I bought the means, for they can even a much better profit, and I made a whole cob straw bed tick. a pair of blue drilling a workman had left on the premise, strips and stitched on. Well, and determined to have some at a little neat striped print, like a substantial gingham, of half a dozen calico. Indeed, it comes out like a new one, and bids fair to outlast and to posterity as an invention, say, and escape the charge of both genius. My bed, some poet stepped forth, and shoes in a long time to do without for the most part. A pair I would keep, indulged in every day, not to be thought of worn-out rubbers, and laced them on my. At length, it had been in wear a century, and garments which had been knit by hand on yarn in the old days had whitened the hills grown around me now, and the custom to have much cloth, much yarn spun on the family use, long thrown by and past wear, ends and no end. Washing them, I tried and found it unrotted, eaten. I had a prize, weeks to ravel, wind into skeins, rewind into balls for knit, redwood and copperas of color. Then 5 or 6 pairs of balls of yarn lefters. Abundance of material. There is one thing very soon, perhaps, and for a long time, retiring at night, or pull it open, socks, pair, and survey them with a fullness I had never experienced over the nicest, or even silk, were trophies of toil. They had cost money and labor, as my own successfulities, their value and favor. I had 15 muslin and cotton flannel, washed and boiled them, supplied my drawer of linens. No outside garment to wear, old, defaced, water. It looked like poverty. It was ragged, quite gone, of a most appearance. In an outer room, I presume, a rusty, full father's. It away long before. I rather liked to see it hang, sort of look as if he. I had been charged a great pair of boots, attempted any neighborliness, such largeness in apparel, and there was a large man whose acquaintance it would not cultivate any protective power to them. I would sometimes get into them my pouring rain to adjust the system, or dig a snowplow, but never alert for means to piece out passed by nothing scan that could afford the lift. So I put my and lifted it off the wood. How heavy it was! Age. It was black lasting diamonds. I lighted on this in my room in triumph and exulted over my prey and went at it, mercy, but just ripped till the floor was a garment. It was a fine, dark, bright as new, and had the stock and I thought so much now, such as would keep the cold, save fuel, proof cloak, wall, and cut away the warmth to replace with strip cloth of the overcoat, that the cloak should look as if trimmed with another shade of material, a respectable garment that would number of cold winters. The shape of this cloak had a pretty black and white flannel, and replaced with some breadths which answered very well. Flannel I fashioned an art to wear abroad in spring, and to make it a better size, stitched black grosgrain ribbon, ravelled a pair of undersized looting, and finished this. And it was indeed most anybody had expect, yes, of it, for I would try it sometimes. With the best silk dress Sparity had ever gave me. Cloak, renovated and remodeled overcoat was better than was surprising what sat my hard contrived garment. There was the shiny quilt. It was as to shape. The style of the reigning cloaks of quilting was quite stylish too. Cashmere to line and trim it was a fit. It was sad not get too near. Glossy was the lasting. Only been a rich woman still would have been exclaiming at a quilted satin, lest even now some person I have never dared wear my. I luxuriate in it. Keeps out wadded throughout, as an oven on my back on Thanksgiving days. I was in a station after such a old overcoat. Why I had kept it so many years. My father, mother, saw my poor lame eye at work, each paring my scant, worn and industriously for days, occupied and engrossed within of the hard fate that had reduced me to this. But what pleased me most were the shoes I got out of. The cloth was so I'll wear a common pair of slipped up an old shoe to have a good, quite a neat fit, without shoes since. Are said to be prettier than those doors. They were, and not unsightly, me. More than that, celebrate with the deep, unwanted effort and endeavor every victory gained over bodily wants, exceedingly over every obstacle which hindered or disputed way. Off the shoe bill at the gave me Harper's pages more irradiated contrivance by which I had than by the learning I might almost say, the having worked through difficulty imparted the enjoyment to the reading, not with poverty for a problem, the grim monster victorious, and sparkling pages, song of triumph. Mittens, wrap on me, put a freeze my back to the stove with it, and go to mine, and doubting if in it wealth and magnificence and velvets sat down with the zest and of course not. New books and periodic to be skimmed over and my one and reread and thought number was not, and its successor came. End of section 1. Section 2 of Living on Half a Dime a Day. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Sue Anderson. Living on Half a Dime a Day by Sarah Elizabeth Harper Monmouth. Section 2. Thus mind fought the battle with despondency, in which injustice, wrong, and misfortune threatened to engulf it. There were enough to prescribe society, the diverting of attention by outside objects. But society, such as lay around me, did not present anything worthy or engaging. To one who had once and again proved its hollowness and false appearances, its insincere professions of kindness and good faith, it was sickening and revolting. I shrank from it as a burnt child dreads the fire. It seemed unfeeling and cruel to urge one in my circumstances to go into society. There my mendicancy would be thrust upon my consciousness in strongest shades of contrast with former ease of condition. Under my own roof I was not humiliated beyond endurance. I kept my self-respect there, but if I attempted any moving about in former circles, the comparison of present with past condition forced itself on me with such startling vividness that I was overwhelmed and felt as if going distracted. Everybody was trying, consciously or unconsciously, to adapt themselves to my new situation, and whether it was by an increased carefulness to show attention, or a haughty distance of manner, or a condescending patronage, the one was about as killing as the other to encounter. And further, my dress was not equal to the demands of society. Had I seen fit to forego my reading and devote my utmost dime to it, I must still have been a shabby appendage at a parlor party. If I could have had access to a company of benevolent workers, persons who had a really noble and useful purpose for which they lived and labored, it would have been as power and inspiration to one in my depression and pain. With all of life wrenched away at once, as it were, its long accustomed ways and habits forced into violent and sudden change, means gone, health gone, the friends that had been around me in the arduous work of a term of years gone, a ruin in the midst of ruin, as I seemed to myself, if I could have entered in amongst earnest workers, and added a mite for the aid or relief of other sufferers, it would have been as the joy of salvation to me, for in my own casting down it seemed as if the woes of all humanity through my heart made a thoroughfare. I was afraid to read of the fearful sufferings of the famine-stricken in India. All their million pangs seemed gnawing at my vitals, yet such recitals had a terrible fascination. I would return again and again to the reading of them. I could picture their pangs, desperation, and despair, down, down, till starvation had finished its grim and horrible work. And I would long to feed them all, for I was full of pity for their lower wants. But at length I would come back to the thought, God seeth and taketh cognizance of all these things, and to Him with whom 1,000 years are as a day, what an insignificant speck and atom must this earthly life appear. And yet, because it is so fleeting and small, the more would one like to be doing the little they can for the benefit of their fellow beings, the more they would long for some outreaching beyond self. And so, because I had nothing, more than ever I wished to help all who were in the same condition. I always held in reserve $1 or $2 for any special call of charity, and a pittance for the Bible and mission cause. I could hardly have consented to breathe without a single cent to bestow in benevolence. A person who would be willing to be an unmitigated mendicant would not be a person. But to return to my struggle with and against material wants. With the aid of my father's old overcoat, I subdued a good many of them for the time being, as has been already related. The succession of the seasons demanded changes in my wardrobe. A flannel gown was not suited to July and August, nor could I be wearing out in warm weather what I should so need in cold. I thought about cutting up an old Allendale bedspread to make me a grand white wrapper, but this I rejected as a temptation to reckless extravagance. How should I ever possess myself of another counterpane? And this one would answer a number of years with care and darning. Then I unfolded and scanned 2 red and white tablecloths in small checker work. I should never spread tables again for visitors. These cloths were not of much use. They had served some years and had holes and stains. They would make me a cool and serviceable wrapper. Not becoming and odd, but then few would see me wear it, and poverty must not expect to consult taste with freedom. But then to wear a tablecloth for a dress, to take that on which food had been spread out for the support of the body, and make of it a covering and protection for the person? Would the tablecloth be elevated or lowered by such appropriation? It would be a divorcement from its natural uses. I refrained my scissors for a time. Though I might never want a tablecloth again, I would wait and plan a while before making the red checkered ones into a summer wrap. To buy a few yards of cambric or calico was out of the question. There was a fear of not bringing the year around by the most rigid economy. One day, behind the door of a dark closet, in an old room where a widow's goods were stored, of which I made no use and entered but occasionally, I put my hand on a cotton garment, and, rather wondering it should be there, took it to the light to see what it might be. It was a chocolate and white print dress that had been my mother's. I recollected of having given it to the girl who helped me through her last illness, directly after her death and burial. The girl had at that time occupied this old chamber. It appeared she had not taken the dress away with her, and year after year had passed by with it hanging in solitary disuse behind the dark closet door. It was almost as if my mother herself had come back to me. It brought such a vision of her as she was in her last days, her little bowed, trembling figure clad in the small figured calico wrapper my own nimble young fingers had made. It certainly seemed as if in this hour of need her arm reached from the unseen to offer aid, to offer what had been her own, and mother-like to offer her all. "Take it and wear it. It has stayed for a time like this," the mother voice seemed to say. So I brought it forth, touching it with a half-reverent awe. It was not long enough for me, but it had been made before the era of gores. There were 5 wide breadths in the skirt, so I could remove a whole one, divide it in 3 parts, and fold the remaining ones onto it. And whenever I caught a reflection of myself in a mirror moving about, it seemed as if it was my mother come back to me, as if in my loneliness, loss, and pain she had come and clothed me with herself. So the dress supplied far more than my bodily needs. It was company and comfort to my mind as well, and if tears rolled down and wet it sometimes, as the sight of it recalled but too vividly the blessed years when sympathy, protection, and love were my abundant possessions, they were soothing, relieving tears. For I said, "Mother still is somewhere. The going years are bearing me toward her. I shall hear her voice and have her love again." In life's supreme moments, when stern realities press close and hedge us in on every side, how does the mere superficial fall to naught? How trivial and below respect appear the occupations and pursuits of worldlings? Truly, what shadows they are, and what shadows they pursue. I saw people arrayed in finery, and marveled that I could ever have done the like. I pitied the short-sighted, low-minded creatures, and felt ashamed for them, absorbed in trifles, as if their clothes were their all. Everybody is as God made him, and oftentimes a good deal worse, says Cervantes. Very true. There is a better side to every nature, which, if cultivated, may bring forth passably good fruit, but it is too often left in neglect to be overgrown with rank and noisome weeds. It requires thoughtfulness, effort, self-denial to nurse it into growth, and most people dislike such labor as this. It is easier and pleasanter to go with the crowd and be one with them, live for the present moment in the gratification of the senses, not the least ashamed to admit, say it even self-approvingly, "It is my aim to take the first care of myself and live just as long as I can." This is on a level with, "Eat as much as you can, it is all you are sure of." Some are sure of considerable, even if this is all. The kingdom of heaven can never come till everybody says and acts up to that saying, "It is my chief aim to help others, nor do I wish to live longer than I can be useful in the world." He liveth long who liveth well. Often I saw people rolling past in easy carriages, but the sight awoke neither envy nor longing in my heart. I was rather glad to be rid of it all. I had always preferred a walk to a ride, and style, circumstances, had placed riding beyond my power. Pain and apprehension of accident, having the sore, crippled arm, made riding something to dread and avoid as much as possible. I was distressed if asked to ride, and had to refuse. I suppose some lady is wondering by this time what I did for a bonnet, and it is an easy task to give information on this point. I simply went without one. Hat or bonnet I had not for 4 years. As I make this assertion, I have a misgiving that it will not be credited. I feel that it is an unparalleled one in the annals of modern life and custom, yet I could lay my hand on the book and solemnly assert its truth. A woman 4 years without a bonnet? In this enlightened land? In the latter part of the 19th century? Not a particularly old or sick woman either, and one who read Mrs. Browning, the best magazines, and all the leading divines of the age at home. Was she demented? It is perhaps not for me to say. I can only admit that if I went abroad, I wore a romance on my head instead of a bonnet. Not the Blithedale. A false appearance, a deceitful show, wrapped about in a screening veil, some shape of a hat destitute of trimmings, its barrenness concealed in friendly folds of barège. It was my one deception in dress, and I deemed it a pardonable, yea, a commendable one under the circumstances. I would rather wear a romance than a mortgage. I knit some winter gloves of ravelled black worsted, and for the rest, one pair of lisle thread went through 4 seasons. They were washed from slate color to dirty white, and dyed in tea several times. I always felt my poorest when I wore them, and sat shamefaced and silent, as if struck dumb at sight of my own abjectness. The careful darns betrayed a watchful anxiety ever on the stretch, a ceaseless, laborious endeavor to be decent, and were, as so many not to be mistaken proofs of poverty, unwilling, extorted confessions of want. However hard it may be to do without the comfort, abundance, or elegance which may once have been our own, it is doubtless not a poor and useless lesson to learn how much we can do without, and yet suffer no essential loss of what is noblest and best. To fall or to rise from the adventitious to the real is, in truth, not a misfortune, for such as live in a vain show, when the power to make a show is gone, all is gone. But if life has deeper springs, then it can survive a drought, and make for itself some greenness and fragrance in a bare desert of poverty and pain. All that is adventitious, all that is human, may fall away from us. What are our resources then? Have we any? The trial will prove us, test our strength, and show of what metal we are made. A novice can manage a sailboat on a smooth sea under a smiling sky, when it does not need any managing. But let the winds roar and the breakers come, and the boat will go to the bottom unless there is a skilled, courageous hand at the post of duty. So, any poor, weak life voyager can manage a calm. It is the managing of the crisis that is the test. End of section 2. Dime a day. Section 3. A dime a day. Recording are in the public domain. Or to volunteer, LibriVox.org. Sue Anderson. A dime a day. Elizabeth Harper Monmouth 3. Half a dime a day of food for that sum every day by any means from this allotment to necessary articles. A spool of thread, pay even a gallon of oil now almost the year round I use in purposes. And more convenient, bought very low to last through cool weather. Go through a whole week on 16 cents and a gill of molasses 3 cents, thus 35 allotted for the week. But this was when my health fine to couch almost all was in this state more. I made large use of cornmeal and nutritious 1 cent, 1.5 cents salt pork. 4 all would support me very well. This days out of 7, boiled with 2 cents worth of, and 3 cents worth of potatoes. Some nourishing food for go a long way towards support. I have heard it said what a Yankee would throw away, live on what a German would throw away. Chinaman could live on what a I almost thought from the whole of them and would throw away. I made a case and salted fish, a pound of oatmeal cooked on third through the week, had a gift of milk, and then like an epicure, a small cup of molasses to a pound of oatmeal. I had some kind of a vegetable or turnip, and for a few cents worth of butcher's to season food than to. When eggs were cheap, I made use of not buy when they were more than. I never could make these go on housewife doing. For a family of after all had eaten freely, there was perhaps this ostrich or more only barn door biddies and want 2 for breakfast. I indulged in a baking or got a pound of lard and donuts, about 6 in a tin cup. I all donuts and looked full of anticipation, plump and round, cup of boiling lard, the fork, and in while the second was cooking. I let them congregate on hers increased to 5. Never more than that. Bread were usually mixed with wine, but if eaten to the cooking, very good. They were my, I would think, as I tend small cup of fat, of brown beauties I had, and thought very lightly of grateful, but regard all good things for the stomach. Of course, never I must choose between food, a table, or a tablespoon, or of lessening the sake of furnishing out the. Perhaps I should not have done. 2 times have I been told by those wiser than I myself that it was one's body, good food, was good, or I was, for I ate it, devised with the eager relish. It lacked in variety, not rich, it was fair taken, and of returns in health. Of course, for the flesh pots, Saturdays I would think of the great houses round me, the array of fresh bread sweet cakes on the pantry almost seemed to inhale the and contrast this speck old cupboard, or with just a corner, and very till I buried myself in value of the soul, the course of such as live gratifications of the present life. This stamp would assert, correctly, the superiority of living, and foolish wick itself in food and clothes live. What must they live, eat, and wear clothes? To say in all, I should rather, of course, food and raiment, the chief concern, end of existence, pitiful and humiliating, toward the benefits of civilization, have some degree of education. A sudden circumstances compelled me to serve, and would mind or matter hesitated at all. I must have possible to do without, for mind, cut loose from time. This life must soon go, still manage to do must start. There was a to endure, a flip eye grew thinner than on dry. The best I could do from it, allow others to lay down the stern necessity more decided and reality than ever. I make a brief digression. I've been waiting a lifetime. Who would afford me opportunity? First name is yet to be a saint's. I don't remember that I have a person to account as to the method of living doors without taking me to sharply, off and condemnation on my unnatural, monstrous way of life. Too much alarmed. I am or a tigress live by myself. Never lived thus before. A dozen people who live that and condemned to death. As if I was alone. Was it not of friends when comparatively thus without being reproached? The perception, a reign of my quiet way of life, canonize self with envy of those happy who, when near ties new ones, it would be like theirs, and condition, but more grievous, like the loneliness of, and there is odd people, that maid can seem odd sight. He comprehends, and at last the love itself to him, misapprehended, and yet, if think enough of earth to treat them nicely, in them and enslaved by neglect and forgetfulness of such a choice be safe, pleasanter, but and grossly and careful do not believe there is any mock at refinement and in order. Thus to criticism in my case, reverses came, people were views, offer at the proper course, let your place or sell it, or things nice and comfortable and enough. I were as sure of for in old age as you, such persons were either ignorant or lacked good sense, thoughtless and unfeeling. Place experience told me annoyances my present state endure. As I loved it better than life, I could get more than 600, but if I could have got paid to buy another support, my supplied than at present have been life away from me. If I had hired my board from me almost before and left me unpublished, my house might have, if I could have superintended my crippled arm. Poor health would not admit of this, to see it go into the lap if life was much prolonged. Now the windows were discharged a mournful brick form. Out of the I could garner enough to subsellers for good books, any worse off than myself, to benevolent causes, hoped or expected. I have done this, and thrived in a small way, time a day, a year, all things in clothing. There has been no contrivance and equip all my garments. I am not accustomed to provide a year. $9 managed to saw most of it, save in winter I pick up tree limbs, pine cones. For almost I use an oil stove, I often heat a freestone, and so as not to require a fire till pretty cool weather. In winter are so paralyzed arm I can do so. Then when I can at least save wood by I do not exact or mouse burrow. Mild spells I thaw out, bring up things that have fallen in cold term in the old house, to see material out of which small holiday gifts who bring me baskets of dimes through the year. I made mention of these before section 3. Section 4 of Living on 4 of Living Day. This is all LibriVox recording. For more information, please visit org. Recording Living Day by Sarah Elizabeth, Section 4. It has been my experience, fortune, to receive this from sources I should not from strangers till the adversity be done no favors, and while others I thought and offerings have and made themselves strangers, nor ever shall know the reason I must not speak of this, than the loss of money, deserving the name, has themselves sufferers mocked me with their pity because they others have ignored and carried themselves morbid imagination to indifference. Advice or consolation to pray every moment, know not what they do, but afflicting the my most efficient aid has they have made some soon forgot it, leave them before it was made, moderately well off from stances, the best they have been more ready than the rich to give out they would never feel, or if that be neither sacrifice nor the friends will never be forgotten. One to think better of human nature are a few here and there than repelled by adversity, belief in the Bible which is poor, rather than deal with the fortunate. It may be said in this style provision for incidental exceeds, and encountering these, when my gate fastenings were stolen, they evaporated, or I tied it together when the shed rained down too hard. I moved the wood pile to another. It never took more than 5 minutes. Shot holes were put through a front end. When the plastic, I pasted patches on laths. No such jobs must come in, is that I must not look up, pray and trust, and I noticed the person's advice were such as had all their necessary expense for contingencies, stomachs, well-stored pantry. They came where all and complacently bade poverty and pain be resigned. Trust. I recoiled from horror. I dumb. I my lips for months beyond, and I did not know what indignation meant about these things. There were, if you want anything, let us. Needless to say, that invitation me to the asking of. There was acute faculties, and one who has no proper society and was on the hands of others as would not be worthy. There had been in affairs that and ways were changed. No myself or the world. I even apprehended that beneath my feet, shattered down into a pile. I don't know as I should have been surprised. Whelming on me was the uncertain nature of all. One and another. I should just for my mother to come back. I must ask God to take. I don't think I ever did. No formula of words was make your. I was to. I had it, but in the sky, and as I could seat on the table before, miraculous manna was mine. Not feed me by direct meal, unless he did feed me, did it through the action of implanted in my nature, perseverance, utmost endeavor, denial, and arithmetic. I believe. But that fear of natural and social employs them. Provision for sickness on one, that is, who live with such severe liable to acute disorder, self-indulgent. Summer complaints, and they did not visit. Had nervous debility, the crippled arm. Comfortable if I could have had, but this I could not. Had any severe illness before the house to pay bills, chronic diseases that not much benefit to justify much outlay. I got along with criticism and misrepresentation. What person ever has another, or will ever to realize another intelligently see, and what they cannot do, as people are absorbed in their own judgments of others, are very, very unjust, often correct understanding of the life of the individual they condemn, perhaps, of whatever comes within the and desires, different views and aspirations comprehend. There is something wrong about them. Oh, mister, asked the traveler who called at her door. Madam, was the polite response. Dear, what makes you, was the pitying rejoinder. People that differ widely from we regard as are inclined to look on with a pity, though theirs, while ours is butterness. Do as you please, says, had to do so. To eat my house. Possible to accept such advice. Rat or squirrel, masticating apparatus. I wish I could eat the barn sometime. Been built of bread instead of a portion of it would be one. Not. For there were months of which I speak, but to sell my buildings at ache, when I could piece of oatmeal, a glorious thing to do, or be able to look my parents. The old house was a shelter, a hiding place, for I was as some hunted creature driven to bay. If I could bear to live, how could I bear to die elsewhere? I had great love of locality, and my adhesiveness was as hoops of steel. With the forces of my nature at their best, I doubt if I could have summoned up resolution to dissever myself from the old place. Now I did not entertain such a thought. There was a pathetic tale in one of my papers at this time of two sisters who had lived past middle age in a certain room of the house in which they were born. They kept every article of furniture standing just where it had stood when they were little children growing up with their mother. They supported themselves by hand sewing. At length machines came in and cut them off. They could get no work. One of them fell ill, the other got worn out taking care of her, and the wolf was upon them. The overseer of the poor went and said it was no use trying to keep along any further. They must sell off what they had and go to the almshouse to be supported. The sister who told the pitiful tale said she guessed the man didn't mean to be unkind, but he spoke in a hard way. She supposed he couldn't know what their feelings were, and after he was gone, the younger sister, who had been nursing the invalid one, went wild, walking round and round the room, touching each precious article of furniture, whispering to herself and wringing her hands. The sick one cried herself to sleep, and when she awoke her faithful nurse was gone. After 3 days she was found afar off among some desolate hills, but reason had left her. She just moaned, "Don't let them take away my mother's little table. Don't let them break us up and send us to the poorhouse." Some humane people were at length moved to save the few articles of furniture, and make a provision by which the pair could have a humble room to themselves, with the things they prized so much around them. But the help came too late to one of the poor sisters. Seasonably given, it might have saved her from breaking down. She was never herself again, but lived years in a harmless insanity. And the elder one, who took patient care of her, said, "I suppose it is too bad in me, but sometimes I can but think how different it all might have been if only someone had found out our need and helped a little before poor Harriet broke down." Ah, yes, if people would not let their good deeds lag, and give the little lift, the small help at the right moment, which means so much before and so little after the Harriets of the world break down, how large an amount of suffering might be spared. This pathetic tale made a deep impression on my mind in my present circumstances. Were I reduced to the condition of this hapless Harriet, I should have no sister to take care of me. I believe from sheer inability to act I remained quiescent at this time, and my ears were pained by reproaches uttered and reproaches implied. No one looked beyond my physical well-being, and this had quite dropped out of sight with me. It depressed and distressed me to hear it named. I was dragged down and set to complaining by people's words. When left to myself, I maintained for the most part a much better frame of mind. There were moments when I sunk utterly down and cried, "Oh, but to see for an hour the world wear its wonted look, to have the burden lifted, to have wiped out the memory of cruel wrong, to feel I've enough for all my wants and to help others, that there need be no more struggle or anxiety, and then to die before the dread reality is rolled back on me." But these were moods, the fluctuations of feeling not at my control while the mind staggered under a succession of severe shocks. There would be the ebb and flow of courage and resolution. My constructive faculty was a help and comfort. It kept me occupied planning and devising ways and means of getting along. Then I would read something that tended to moral growth and improvement of character, and ponder and meditate upon it. It seemed to me as if I was managing with my mind as a mother will sometimes manage with a child that inclines to an object hurtful and dangerous, by coaxing off its attention in other directions, and fixing it on objects it may safely enjoy. I had also a certain power of concentration, which I had held in much disesteem heretofore. It often made me appear abstracted and moody, but now it was one of my best friends, as I could, after a brief conflict, become absorbed in the occupation of the hour, and be intently knitting my sail socks, counting up the proceeds, and thinking what I would buy with the money. I did a dozen pairs in a month by great industry, and got $2. This I could not do all the time owing to my painful crippled arm. The work was furnished me by a Shaker Society. These peculiar people were very kind to me in many generous and thoughtful ways. There was a sweet Sister Mary, a poetess skilled to make graceful and excellent gifts. She furnished me with all the tea I had for years. I am not a habitual indulger in the herb. Coffee I do not use, chocolate but occasionally. Luckily I was brought up on cold water, which is my favorite and accustomed beverage still. These Shaker Sisters of Charity carried me through one dark, dreadful time of sickness, destitution, and neglect. I shall ever remember them with emotions of gratitude and respect. Dr. Warner has sharply arraigned the sect. Their way of life seems harmless, if eccentric. Of their doctrines I cannot say more than this: the tree is known by its fruits. They are a people of eminent cleanliness, industry, kindness, virtue, and good deeds, and this is no contemptible record, nor one that any person need blush for. Their manners and customs may invite some harmless criticism, but to enjoy their hospitality and then make their peculiarities the target for public satire and ridicule seems ungenerous and ungentlemanly. End of section 4. dime a day. Section 5, a dime a day. Recording are in the public domain. Or to volunteer, box.org. Sue Anderson, a dime a day. Harper Monmouth. 5. In my humiliation, I would have hailed with joy any benevolent work, one so poor and reduced. I languished most of nothing to help anybody in the loss of property, nothing more to give. I was not reality. Folks would tell more selfish. Surely it was, needed them, but doubtless. So at length, the is, I have got a Annum for a number of years, sustained sufficient vitality for active life. I'll lead any other. Articles held in reserve against the best things, however, were time. As more than 2 wrappers in a year, reasonably hope to retain the red fall back upon in case of necessity. I can fashion a warm weather last a good many seasons. A winter garment, for a trifle, a mouse holes gnawed in coarse cotton, with over such as were woven by our. It is not indigo blue and white this period, but of medium-sized plaid. I propose to dye of a dark cold weather dress, if needed. Always taught to have some. As to shoes, of the full cloth of the old, to supply me a light. Bonnets don't signify, demonstrated by succeeding them for a space of. So I am for an indefinite period to come, as I need to spend 50, perhaps 10 years, should I procure any necessary. So I may lay roof and putties into the most clattering, to be able to hold my own on an extra $1 or 2 for charity. Do not say my tastes and add in this stern severe. No, they are all sacrificed. If by chance I get a or other thing, pang convulses me. It is and must be. Only nature round my low valley hold, the changing variety, sweet sounds, the birds in summer and winter. From the printed by my knowledge of them, grand old England, wild Switzerland, sacred Palestine, dearest hope of my life to scene of the eye. The heart aches as it cries, what loss? Traveler, my delicacy, I was uncovered annoyance. There's thrones whereon I wation, but the hand I had was scattering my few thought, and all had years before knowledge. Fewer and simpler, as the mind is just, it is the human hand. Get now and then a new book is valuable, again and again, keen and vigorous, to thank God every day reading, as they able to gratify in a measure. I think it has been my salvation, imbecility of mind, one solace and relief, and the love and gratitude whose words gave me sustaining, inspired to hope and endeavor, and most cherished, preeminent among Beecher, Phillips, and Dr. Holland. I see and converse with these dreamland than those with real flesh, for the veil seems to be, there is perfect, but charge of mysticism, the most real and only given to moods not returned, made up to me in any world, not escape poverty, disarmed it in a measure, letting go of lower things. And I never loved feigning what I did not feel. Worldlings complained of my blunt possible for me to make, but if I thus feel, I also escape many evil things in society. Is a sincere and loose to time towards eternity. Mysterious things as towards me in days of have perplexed and pain, have been beyond the bitterness. When the sealed, these things, wealth brings, I do not suppose to administer it wisely, and mine was only a competence of my life was gone when I out from as I could. I only wish I had given, but what is gone cannot be. I have tried and succeeded a tolerable independent term of years, and may be able thus to. If this be delicate, I am most impression that I have trued us and need. This is not a light solicitation of all, it is a declaration of, I don't know, I dare not say it is, but it is the egotism even of oatmeal. Shoes. M. Sarah. End of Live a Day by Monmouth.